What happens when a man is fired an hour before retirement after 38 years of perfect service? He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't go to court. What he did next was make them come to him in person and silently reach out to him. Last day on the job, you say? A day of honors, balloons, crumpled cards, and thank you for your service or spoken with as much enthusiasm as the weather in an elevator? Not in my story. I woke up as usual at 5:15 a.m. Not because I wanted to, but because 38 years of habits don't let go even when I should be sleeping through lunch with a newspaper on my chest. I pulled on my pants, the same pants that the two of us had worn all the way from the first presentation to the last Friday report. They're barely holding up, of course, but they're holding up. So am I, surprisingly. In the kitchen, my wife put coffee on the stove, silently, no questions asked. We both knew it was a thank you and goodbye day, except she thought it would also be see you at the buffet. So did I. I even bought a pie, for everyone, with cherries. My way of saying, I'm still a human being, not just job number 038947. Getting to the office was just like the first day. Only then there was excitement, but now, a deafening heaviness, as if I were carrying not a briefcase, but someone's mortgage. Charlie's guard was gone at the entrance, replaced by a young man who asked me for my ID as if it were the first time he'd seen me. Yeah, well, it was the first time he'd ever seen me, and, judging by his eyes, the last. In the elevator, I caught my reflection, a heavy face where decades of overwork, loyalty, and canceled vacations had come together. You knew this is how it would end, I said to myself mentally. But down inside, there was still hope stirring somewhere. Maybe they'd get together after all. Make a toast. Take a picture. Maybe someone will say, "Damn, I'll miss you." Yeah, keep your pocket wide open. On the 27th floor, I was greeted by silence. Not just silence, but an organized, almost aggressive emptiness. It was as if someone had moved people out of my way beforehand. My assistant was gone. Colleagues, not a soul. Only George from HR sat in the office. Folding his hands on his desk, he squeezed out a squeal. "Steve, we need to talk," and immediately placed an envelope on the desk. No stamp, no acknowledgement, just a signature and the dry wording, "Your position has been deemed redundant as part of the reorganization. Completion date is today's date. Sign here, here, and thank you for everything." And he didn't even look me in the eye. I stood up. No words, no scene. Just got up, carefully picked up my box of stuff, and walked out. They wouldn't let me say goodbye. There wasn't even a pie to leave. Everything was already decided. I didn't know that today. I didn't know it yesterday. It started a couple months ago when I stopped being called to key meetings. When my project and the project that brought the company 14% growth in 2020 was handed off to a junior innovation manager named Brandon, who thinks Excel is the name of a dog. I was zeroed in, canceled, erased, an hour before retirement. Walking past reception, I put the pie on the table and said, "Tell Jane it's gluten-free." She always thought gluten made her less productive. In the parking lot, I got in my car, sat with the keys in my hand, and I didn't start it. Just stared out the windshield at the reflection of the building where I'd left most of myself. And you know what I felt? Nothing. Emptiness. Not pain, not rage. Just the same emptiness that comes when you finally realize they never needed you. You were profitable, convenient. For a while, it wasn't a firing, it was a spit. A calm, businesslike, documented spit in the face, and I swallowed it. Not because I'm weak, but because I knew that silence is louder than scandal. And I had time. A lot of time. Now I had time. Too much. I got home around 10 o'clock. Didn't call, didn't write, just walked into the house as if I'd forgotten my keys. Not my life. My wife met me on the doorstep with a raised eyebrow and a mug of coffee in her hand. "Did you forget something?" she asked, glancing at her watch. "Yes," I answered as I walked past. The future." She didn't realize it right away, and to be honest, I didn't realize what I'd said either. I just sat down on the couch, took off my shoes and stared at the wall. The one I promised I'd repaint as soon as I retired. There you go. I'm out. But now there was nothing to repaint, not the wall, not my life. Steve, you're not kidding, are you? What do you mean you're home at 10 o'clock in the morning? She put the mug down on the coaster as if she were diagnosing me. I got fired. An hour before, well, before everything. She stopped talking. Didn't aghast, didn't flail her arms, didn't throw herself into a hug. She just sat silently across from me and stared. In her eyes was everything: resentment, fear, confusion, and most importantly, the question, what now? Just like that? No explanation. There were explanations. Brief, dry, no sugar, and no cream. Are you going to do something about it? I shrugged my shoulders. Surprisingly, it was quiet inside, like someone had pressed the mute button in my head. We didn't speak again that day. She went into the bedroom. I stayed on the couch. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know how to tell her now that all of our plans, from traveling through Utah to replacing the old refrigerator, no longer made sense. The third day after I got fired, I decided to clean up my office. You know, that moment when you kind of want to free up space, but really just don't want to face the facts. I opened the bottom drawer and found a box. Old cardboard, yellowed. Inside were certificates, photos, badges from corporate events. One labeled Employee of the Year, 2007. I remember the whole department standing up and clapping. Even the manager said something like, "If we had a second Steve, I could sleep easy." And now apparently he sleeps even better. Without Steve. Took one picture. Me and the team in front of a banner that says, "We're a family." What the hell kind of family? What kind of family fires you over a piece of paper with no signature? What kind of family says you're a liability when you kept the department afloat through 3 economic crises? I couldn't take it. I threw that picture at the wall. It bounced off, fell face down. And you know what? I was relieved. For the first time in a while, they took away my job, my pension, my pride, but not my memory and not my voice. On the morning of the 4th day, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My wife had left on business, and the house was so quiet that even the ticking of the wall clock sounded like an interrogation. A courier stood on the doorstep with a clipboard and a thin folder in his hands. "Sign, please. Documents from the central office." I signed, closed the door, and sat with the envelope in the kitchen. The paper inside was smooth, smelling of printing ink. It officially confirmed my pension was being canceled because my dismissal had occurred outside the regulated pension window. No mention of merit, no mention of my contribution, just a technical notice. It was as if I didn't even exist. If someone from their HR department had been sitting at the table at that moment, I would have served him coffee, shaken his hand, and thrown him over the balcony. No anger, just the fact of the matter. Because that would have been more honest than anything they'd done. I put the letter in an upright stand, like a monument. Let it stand. A reminder that you can't take "we value our employees" for granted. You know what the bitter part is? I still got up at 5:15, even for no reason. My body remembered, like a dog that's been trained and then taken outside. And here I sit, a man with 38 years under his belt, a ton of experience, with reports that saved their budget, with projects that won them bonuses, and now with an empty house, a frozen pension, and a piece of paper that replaced my life's finale. Silence? Yes, I am silent, but only because my move isn't screaming, it's waiting. And trust me, it will be louder than all their fake corporate chorus. And so begins a new chapter, no applause, but with a clear head. The day after a layoff is not a Monday or a Friday. It's a day in which you seem to be there, but there's no point to you. It's like you're an old fax machine. It seems to work, but nobody needs it anymore. I woke up at 5:15. Of course you did, because my body didn't get the memo that it was okay to relax now. It still thought I had an office waiting for me. Reports, phone calls, morning coffee made of plastic that tasted like burnt longing. The kitchen was quiet. My wife had gone to see a friend, or a lawyer, who knows. I was left with the toaster, which always throws one slice of bread on the floor. He apparently also felt I had become redundant. Even machinery shows character when you're useless. I sat down at the table and tried to make a plan for the day. 3 items came out. Breathe, don't go crazy, don't break the TV. The first one was mandatory. The second is optional. The third depends on the news. Instead of business, I went to see Charlie, the same security guard who, unlike the managers, at least knew my name. We sat on a bench outside his house. He poured coffee from a thermos and said things that usually only old people on the bus say. You know, Steve, work is like a wife. As long as you're with her, you're important. As soon as you leave, she's with someone else and says you were too stable. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it's true. Back home, I decided to revisit old emails. A folder of thank yous, internal reviews, congratulations, all that corporate cotton candy that was supposed to mean something. I thought reminding myself who I was would make me feel better. Mistake. Every email cut to the core. Thanks for your contribution. Couldn't have done it without you. You're a pillar of our department. Uh-huh. Such a pillar that they took it away without even saying goodbye. All those words were like writing on the wall of the Titanic. And here I sit, surrounded by phantoms of my own loyalty, and I realize I was not just thrown out. I've been betrayed. No drama, no screaming. Just quietly hitting the delete button. On the third day, my wife brought the paper. On the cover was my former boss. In an interview, he talked about a flexible workforce management model. I read it 3 times. Flexibility, you say? I used to be so flexible I'd bend myself into knots just to meet the plan, and now I'm out of line. Broke, so to speak. On the 4th day, I met up with Ben, old friend, former coworker. He'd left when he realized where things were going. We sat down in a cafe. I ordered a black coffee, sugar-free like I'd hoped. I warned you, Steve, he said. They're not about people. They're about numbers, and you're too expensive a unit for them. I nodded. Inside, I was boiling, but on the outside, I was like a rock. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. He looked at me carefully. You've been quiet for too long, but you're not like that. I remember you from 2009. Remember? You picked up the department when everyone else was down, and you're going to do it now, but not the department. You. I didn't answer, because for the first time in a long time, I felt like doing something, not out of revenge, but out of principle, because sometimes a man has to stand up, not because he can, but because he can no longer sit. Later that day, I received a letter from the pension fund. The paper, official, with all those coats of arms and seals, as if they were presenting a medal for defeat. Inside is paragraph after paragraph of legal nonsense. The gist? My pension is inactive. Because I didn't, you see, properly withdraw from it. Properly? I worked weekends for 38 years, took scheduled vacations, wore a suit even at 35 degrees. How else was I supposed to go out in a gown with fanfare? I called customer service. A girl with a voice like an automated secretary cheerfully reported, "Your status in the system does not meet the criteria for completing the service with a bonus. And my contribution to the system doesn't meet the criteria for you to at least have a human conversation either?" I asked. Silence. Then, "That's all I can offer you." That's when I felt for the first time. Not anger, no. Deeper. A kind of pure betrayal. As if you'd spent 38 years building a bridge and you'd been hit over the head with a rebar. This evening I opened the old documents again. Not out of nostalgia. Out of rage. I started digging through my archives like a cop, not for the sake of order, but to find traces. Letters, scans, internal reports. One file caught my eye. Correspondence on the 2015 award. There were numbers I hadn't noticed before. Names, signatures. All the people now sitting in the chairs I'd practically pulled them out of when times were tough. And as I leafed through it all, I realized one simple thing. I was not a passive participant in this story. I was a builder. I was holding up the floors. And when the building became too comfortable, I was just taken out with the trash. Is that funny? Maybe, if it wasn't so disgusting. My wife came into the room and saw me typing. "Are you writing a letter?" "Ilayen a memo. For those who think it's okay to treat the elderly like furniture." She didn't argue. She just closed the door. Smart woman, she knew something was starting. Not war yet, but not silence. Later at dinner, my wife put a plate in front of me. Baked chicken, rice, a little salad. Something I loved. What was once a reward after a hard day's work. Now it's like a handout to a senior citizen who's cluttering up the kitchen. I was thinking maybe you should talk to a lawyer, she said, trying not to make eye contact. How about an exorcist? I feel like I've been exorcised instead of fired, I muttered. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me. And there was weariness in her eyes. Of everything. Of the injustice. Of my silence. Of our future suddenly being too long and too unclear. I just want you to be you again, she said quietly. I got up from the table. Not because I was angry, because I didn't know who that being myself again was. The Steve who used to joke around with coworkers, come home with flowers, make plans for Alaska, he seemed to have quit with me, without warning. I walked out into the backyard, sat in a plastic chair that creaked like my joints in the morning, stared out into the darkness. The sky was clear, but I couldn't see any stars. Only reflections, in the windows of the neighbor's house. There were children playing there, screaming, living. I had silence. Too long, too empty. Sometimes loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's when you don't need yourself anymore. I thought about how none of my coworkers had written in the last few days. Not a single email, not a text. No hang in there, buddy. So I wasn't a buddy at all. So he was a cog, just a cog with a face and a mortgage. And that night I went to bed like a soldier after a lost battle. Not with defeat, but with the realization that it wasn't an accident. It had been decided, which meant I had the right to decide something too. The next morning began with a neighbor mowing his lawn. The engine of his old trimmer roared as if someone was starting an airplane right under my window. I looked out. He waved and shouted, "How was your vacation, Steve?" I nodded. Didn't bother shouting back, "It's not a vacation, it's exile." He wouldn't have understood. And why would he? To him, I'm just an ex-worker who's been retired, only without a pension. I went into the kitchen. I made some coffee. No milk, no sugar, because why not be true to my own situation? Bitter, black, unadorned. There was an old magnetic board on the fridge. I still had my plan on it. Weekly tasks. Item 1, prepare a presentation. Item 2, agree on a report. I erased them, with crayons, slowly, with effort, and I wrote, Point 1, get your voice back. It wasn't just an oratory, it was a principle. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. For the first time in days, I realized they were counting on me to disappear, like dozens before me. Leave in silence, politely, no scandal. So their Excel summaries wouldn't be tainted by the noise. But I wasn't a number. I was their memory, their past, and now their problem. I walked over to the desk, I opened my laptop, and I started. Not a revenge plan, not a letter to the department, but what I knew best, systems work, but not for them. It's for myself. This is the culmination. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see the hero, put everyone in their place. When I woke up again at 5:15, this time it was different. There was no pain. There was no confusion. There was just a cold, neatly gathered resolve. The kind that comes from people who have nothing more to lose, only to gain it back. I sat down at my laptop, just like I used to sit down at my reports. Only now my data was my life. I started simple. The archive. I had copies of almost every document we'd produced in the department over the last 15 years. Plus, drafts, mail, internal analytics. Not because I wanted to spy on anyone. It's just that I've always been an old-fashioned pedant. And now that pedantry has become a weapon. The first thing I found was an old file from 2011. It had a report on top management bonuses, and in the appendix, a table with informal accruals through contractors. I don't need to explain what that is. There were names, amounts, signatures, and ironically, one of the signers was the same person who signed my goodbye envelope. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't seething. I acted like an engineer fixing a broken network, folder by folder, file by file. In 24 hours, I had an archive that would interest at least 3, the IREs, the pension fund, and the editorial board of a respected newspaper. But I was in no hurry. I realized it shouldn't look like revenge. It had to look like the truth. The simple, raw, undeniable truth. The kind that requires no explanation, one that just is, and hits those who are used to rules being only for others. I created an anonymous account, uploaded my documents to an encrypted cloud service, wrote an email, no emotion, no accusations, just the facts, and added one sentence. If that's not a reason to check, I don't even know what is. After that, I shut the laptop down. Just shut it down. For the first time in a long time, I felt no anxiety or fear. Just a quiet satisfaction that I had done the right thing. No noise, no posters, no revenge. Just a conscience. 3 days later, the headlines started crawling across the feed like ants to spill jam. Techwell Group executives suspected of using bonus withdrawal schemes. The IRS has launched an audit of the company's corporate records. Internal leaks? Who's behind the revelations? I read this with tea, not with whiskey, not champagne, just regular strong tea, because the celebration wasn't in the headlines. It was the silence that was finally over. On the fourth morning after the letters were sent, I got a phone call, an unknown number. The voice was male, confident, with a slight note of urgency. "Good afternoon, it's from the Ethics Council. We've received the materials and frankly, you've blown up a beehive." I didn't say anything, I just listened. "We'd like to meet in person, discuss possible cooperation with the investigation. I'm not looking for a trial, I'm looking for the truth." "Then you're already on the right track." After the call, I went down to the kitchen. My wife was standing at the window looking out into the garden. She turned around, not surprised, not frightened. Calm. But there was something new in her eyes. Was it pride? Or just relief that I was breathing again? "Is that you?" she asked. "Who else?" I shrugged. She silently handed me a cup of coffee. For the first time in weeks, with 2 spoonfuls of sugar, just the way I liked it before the whole thing. Meanwhile, there was a real water cooler going around the company. The newspaper ran a detailed story with charts, graphs, diagrams, signatures, and documents. Some names were blacked out, but those who knew, knew, and those who didn't know were now guessing. Monday morning, I got a call from Ben. The laughter on the phone was almost evil. "Did you see Harper's face on the morning show?" He looked like a schoolboy caught cheating. "They're in a panic. The board of directors is calling an emergency meeting." "I didn't want it to be a show." "It's not a show. This is payback." I turned off the phone and went out into the garden. There were still leaves lying there that I hadn't cleaned up since the fall. I picked up the rake, and I started. Because justice is like cleaning. No one does it for you, but once you do it, it's easier to breathe. On the 7th day, I received a registered letter. The paper is thick, stamped, the company logo printed in silver. Inside was an official invitation to dialogue, as they called it. "Dear Steve, we deeply regret that your retirement did not meet the expected level of attention and recognition. We are considering reinstating your emeritus status due to a review of corporate policy." What a turnaround. 38 years, and suddenly I'm honorable again, after being tossed out like expired milk. I reread the letter again. Then I turned it over. The back was blank. Not a single mention of a pension supplement. Not one line about compensation. Just honor and respect. Free as fresh air. Only they didn't make it any better. I didn't answer. Why should I? Let them wait. Let them consume the silence they fed me. A day later, I got a call from a reporter. Young, voice fast, swallowed the words. "Steve, can I ask you a couple questions? People want to know who you are. Why didn't you say anything for so long?" "Because as long as you're working, you're part of the machine. And a machine shouldn't make noise. And now? Now I'm free, which means I can make as much noise as I want." He laughed, asked if I could publish it. I let him, because I had nothing left to hide. And so I sat there reading an article with the headline, "The Silence That Broke the System." And I thought, not about revenge. It was about balance, about things being back to where they should be. A week later, they came in person. 2, a man and a woman, strict suits, even smiles. Said they represented the new board of the company. that they wanted to talk settlement. I invited them to the veranda. Not in the house. Let them feel what it's like to be outside. We realize the situation has been publicized, the man began. We'd like to close the matter in a civilized manner. Closure? I questioned. And when you opened it, was I part of that dialogue? They glanced at each other. The woman pulled out a folder. Here is a new recalculation of your pension rights. We've added a surcharge for any outstanding bonuses. There's also a letter of formal apology. I took the papers. I read it. There really were numbers in there. Big ones. There was the phrase reinstatement. Even the general's signature. I didn't feel the celebration. There was no music, no fireworks. There was a sense of, order, like the puzzle was finally falling into place. Only I wasn't looking for it anymore. Take the letter, I said. Keep the check. I beg your pardon? I don't forgive you. I just don't hold it anymore. They left quietly, no handshakes, no pictures, and that was good. In the evening, I went out on the porch. My wife served me tea. We sat in silence. Birds sang above us. Somewhere, a neighbor was running his lawnmower again. Everything was back to normal. Only I was no longer part of their circle. I was myself, calm, whole, and most importantly, audible. I sorted through a drawer of files, old documents, photos, awards. I went through everything. Some I threw away, some I kept. Not out of sentimentality, but because now I get to choose what I keep. I found the same plaque that used to be on my desk. Steve Harper, head of development. It's worn, scratched, but it's intact. I didn't put it back in the box. I put it on the shelf next to the books. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the ending isn't written for you. It's written by you, and you choose whether to put a period, a comma, or start over. And I chose to start. And I finally realized why I'd been silent for 38 years. Not out of fear, it was because I believed. I believed that the system would protect you if you were loyal to it. And it's just a machine. But now I have a voice, and more importantly, the choice of when to use it. Now I still wake up at 5:15 every morning, only no longer because I have to. It's because I can.